WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It is the off-season around here for all things National Football League, although every week I put on the alliances on. We got hockey, we got Terps, we got spring trainings in some cities, but not here in Baltimore. And I've been sort of stretching out and putting that little list of things together, books I want to read, docs I want to get to, things on the DVR. Everyone knows I'm a big HBO guy. At some point, they'll send me a Bill Maher hat, and he's coming to town. But anytime I get a chance to talk to any of the spiritual brothers and sisters of Ross Greenberg, I like doing that. And Nick Buoniconti is a special case for me because I grew up in Baltimore watching him play as a Miami Dolphin, and the Dolphins always beat the snot out of the Colts when I was a kid in Don Shula. And I had to explain to my wife who Nick Buoniconti was, and I said, there's this doc coming out, and I know he's had such complexities in his life with his son. There was a famous story, and obviously on HBO as a kid from 1980 or 81, watching Inside the NFL every single week as a kid with Nick and Len. I want to welcome on Bentley Weiner from HBO. She is an executive producer there and vice president, and I can't believe our paths have never crossed in 2 decades of HBO for as many times as I've had HBO guests on and Ross himself on. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome you on, Bentley Weiner, and I know you've put together this Nick Buoniconti thing, and you've been at HBO 18 years. Nick Buoniconti's not just sort of a documentary at HBO. He's sort of on the Rushmore sort of, thing. I mean, from a kid in the early 80s he was one of the solids on HBO because mostly it was movies and stuff. He was something I could count on every week along with Len Dawson,
Yeah, no, Nick. Nice to be with you, Nestor. Nick is he's a part of the history here at HBO Sports with Inside the NFL, and I actually worked on that show I started producing on that show, but it was after Nick and Len had left. I started producing in the Costas era.
Well, for me watching it, as a kid, Nick Buoniconti was already a star to me in my household because the Dolphins came and played here every year, right? And won a lot of battles. He's had such a full, rich, amazing life. And I was trying to lay it out for my wife. I said to my wife, I was literally Googling you and, 3 days ago booking you on the show. And I said, how do I not know Bentley, through all these people? And she did this Buoniconti thing. And my wife said, who's Nick Buoniconti? And I tried to explain it to her. And I said, we're going to watch the documentary together. And I guess this is where you jump off and start to tell the story in HBO style of his very rich life and what's happened to him. Because a lot of people are saying, what happened to Nick? I don't remember the rest of the story after his son and his charitable works, which went on for 2 decades, right?
Yeah, and it's actually still going on. He's still the Miami Project, which is what he started, is still a very big spinal cord research facility in the world. It's really the most thorough, I think, in the world.
Well, in picking the story up from the beginning, soup to nuts, what are you trying to do with what you've done here with the Buoniconti story?
We're really trying to just tell his story. It's such a unique story. He was a trailblazer. He was a guy, a lot of a certain generation people know the name Nick Buoniconti, but a lot of people don't. And what really is so unique about him, he was a Hall of Fame linebacker, but he was also a lawyer, an agent. He was a broadcaster, as you talked about on Inside the NFL. He was an executive. He was the president and chief operating officer of U.S. Tobacco. In the mid 80s, and then he became a huge philanthropist. And today, he's really also an activist for CTE because he is seeing some signs that are looking like he may have it.
Yeah, I talk about CTE all the time. I had Dr. Kevin Crutchfield on from LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute, one of our sponsors, and we talk about this all the time. I just got back from the Super Bowl in Atlanta, and, Merrill Hodge will sit next to me and claim one thing and writes a book on one thing. I have doctors and scientists and the concussion movie, which sort of dramatized this. When it's real life and it's someone and as you said, you were a kid growing up through HBO and what he represents for everybody down the hallway, I knew him from coming into my house on HBO before. I mean, sometimes I would videotape it, quite frankly. I knew how to work my VHS machine, Bentley. And to watch it every week, it was one of the places where the NFL Films highlights appeared. And that nerds me out back to the 80s and saying I was the guy waiting for the halftime highlights with Howard Cosell. But that harkens back to the era of this was the one place I could get 2.5 minutes of Houston Oilers insights after they took the Colts away from me here in the 80s. And Nick Buoniconti was always a part of that. So I watched that show really religiously because there wasn't a ton of football program. There wasn't an NFL network then. That's why HBO got into the NFL space, I think, on that weekly basis with that show. But it sounds to me like he just flew in from Miami and nailed that thing in an hour with Len and went back and had a really, really full life. And when the tragedy happened with his son, he was in the midst of all of that fullness and richness of living his post-football life as all of that. Lawyer, agent, television star, which, I would say he was in the 80s because there wasn't a whole lot of football, and he was one of those trusted voices because he did play on an undefeated team and all those things that happened in his football life.
Yeah, and that's really, the heart of the doc is sort of about what the game of football has given to Nick and his family, and also what it's taken away. He has a pretty complex relationship with the game, and up until that point in '85, when Mark was injured, the game did amazing things for him. He was the first in his family to go to college, and he got a scholarship to Notre Dame, someplace he would have never gone, and he valued education, and he preached it to his children, and his kids went to Citadel and Duke and the University of Florida. And then tragedy struck, and it was the first time that his son was injured playing football, and it was the first time that the game had obviously a very, very negative effect on his life.
I can see your background and where you sit as a VP and a senior producer at HBO and know that you love telling stories, right? So the whole background of all of this and Ross Greenberg and everything you guys do at HBO is telling stories. And this story's right inside of your house, right? And it becomes this compelling thing. The era of the documentary where we go on to Netflix or we go on to wherever we can click a button and watch these stories being told, I really have deep respect for people like you that sit in editing suites and behind the scenes and research these things, because I've written a couple of books myself and I know what a sort of solemn, solitary task it can be to try to tell these stories. But there's something very compelling about the work you do. What are your favorite stories that you've told over the course? You've been there 2 decades. You guys tell stories. And when I think of HBO and sports,
we do. And before I tell you that, I just need to tell you that it is, some of it is solitary, but just to let you know, we have an amazing team here too. What goes into a documentary? I have amazing bosses and a man named Rick Bernstein who actually worked with Nick Buoniconti, and Peter Nelson who heads our department, but also our team of producers and editors and production assistants on this film, writers. It's a true team effort to do a doc of this magnitude.
Well, it comes out in 45 or 50 minutes, but it's 8 months of work, a year of work, sometimes 2 years of work, right?
Oh, yeah. No, we've it generally takes almost a year to put something like this together. We started in the research stages early last year. And started filming in earnest in the spring and worked through the end of the year.
Probably not hard to find people around Nick Buoniconti who would have stories to tell about him, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's lots of. I'm sorry, you want to know about stories? Tell me again.
No, just storytelling. This is one story. You've told hundreds there over the course of time, and I'm sure there's one or two that were your story, and the soup to nuts, the best stories you've told, because there are so many of them. I don't have time to watch all of them, quite frankly.
Yeah, one of my favorites was actually one of the last the docs that I directed. It was called Legendary Nights: The Tale of Gotti Ward, and I don't know if you know anything about boxing, but those two guys were warriors, and they had an amazing 3 fights in the ring. That's really just a classic sports story, about two guys who were battling and they became the best of friends. And then there was some tragedy in it. That was really a great story.
A boxing story on HBO, I can't imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
the root of all of it. It's great to have you on, Bentley. I appreciate, and I'll tell everybody they can go find it at HBO, online, on demand, all that stuff. I've been a subscriber, probably 37 years. I don't think I've ever, I did live in the city. We didn't have cable television for a little while, but for the most part, I've been an HBO subscriber. At some point, someone's going to get me into a Bill Maher taping in L.A. on a weekend when I'm there. So
I'm sure someone can pull.
I'm trying to make friends with everybody out there. We'll send everybody out to follow you and the Buoniconti story, and really an incredible doc that's out, coming out this week. Lawyer, linebacker,
tonight,
agent.
In fact.
Tonight, there you go. Executive broadcaster, philanthropist, activist, the many lives of Nick Buoniconti. Go check it out at HBO. It's not TV, it's HBO. I like saying that.
Love it. Thanks, Nestor.
Bentley, great having you on. Bentley Weiner joining us here from HBO. Home box office, just getting that right. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading that. You can also find me out on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.